Hello, everybody. Welcome. This is Beardson Beardley here, live with potentially future governor of Florida, James Fishback. How are you doing, man? How's it going?
I'm good. This is an interesting plot twist for the last 4 or 5 days.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not gonna lie. I wasn't really expecting to talk to you or have you on here, to be honest. But well, politics is a weird place, isn't it? I'm sure, as you know, because you're here right now with a guy named Beardson Beardley. So, um, yeah. How's it going? How are you doing tonight?
It's good, man. Merry Christmas. It's two big holidays on the agenda. Obviously, the birth of Christ, the birth of our Lord and Savior. Obviously, it's the 1 year anniversary of the Vivek Christmas crash out. That's just a couple days away. And what better way to celebrate that division than you and I coming together and hopefully uniting in some way? But good to be here.
Yeah. It's been an interesting week to say the least. I you kind of came on my radar about I mean probably a couple weeks ago. I saw that you were running, and at first it's like I saw a lot of the things that you were saying, and I'm like, okay, I like this guy so far, but it's like, you know how it is with politics too. It's like we always got to be on guard, and we kind of had it out a little bit on Twitter. Here we are now. It is time to just finally have the conversation um, that I think a lot of people have been kind of wanting to have. And I at the end of the day, I hope me and you both we look great and everybody's happy and everybody loves everybody and everybody's in the jolly Christmas spirit. So, I mean, I guess just real quick to go ahead and just introduce why you're running for governor. Like, what's the motivation there behind that?
I think that I I honestly think I'm running. I think there's the reason you tell people, but I'll give you the reason I actually think I'm running, which is I actually met with all of the candidates, likely candidates, declared candidates over the course of a couple months. I had a long dinner with Byron Donalds, and for 3 hours, just him, his wife, and me, Capitol Grill, Naples. This was in mid-August, and I just walked out of there thinking this guy is totally unqualified to be our governor. The things he said about, I asked his wife, I said, hey, if you guys win, would you move to Tallahassee right away or would you take your time? Like, I don't know how that typically works because Tallahassee is our state capital here in Florida. And she said, well, we're not moving there. The panhandle where Tallahassee is, the panhandle is a dump. And I thought, well, that's weird. I mean, that's a place where 1.5 million people live. It's historically a white part of the state, predominantly white. It's where the largest military base is in Florida. Eglin Air Force Base is in the Western Panhandle. It's where a number of Civil War battles was fought, most famously the Battle of Mariana. Uh, and I just thought, wow, and that kind of started a thought in my head. I didn't go into that dinner thinking, wow, I really want to size them up and see if I could beat them. But I walked out of that saying somebody else has to run or I have to really consider doing it. And I met with the other candidates and thought, gosh, these guys, maybe they're good people, but they're really not part of this emerging and extremely popular and I think extremely right part of the party, which is the America First wing, which I got to tell you, I probably would not have identified with 4 years ago, maybe by some accounts, even a year or two ago. But a lot has changed even since Trump won last year. A lot has changed of my own views, just seeing stuff on the ground. I'm really kind of fed up with the line go up Republicans, the idea that, okay, third quarter GDP was 4.3% means absolutely nothing when FedEx can take $1 billion government contract from the feds and then lay off Americans and hire Indian H-1Bs. It means absolutely nothing when you've got 7 million working age men, predominantly white, who are either not working or looking for work. It means nothing when we let the tech bros come into our government and control the administration and do things that are clearly not in the best interest of American workers. That's kind of where my frustration has come from. And I'm running honestly because I don't think there's another candidate who represents this vision for my state.
Okay. No, I mean it all sounds good. And and that's kind of the thing. It's like I initially liked a lot of the stuff that you were saying, especially touching on issues like H-1B is like very important considering we have Vivek running in Ohio, and this seems to be a really big point of contention in the Republican Party. I think a lot of us saw what you were saying is like, oh, that's refreshing. Okay, somebody who's not going to just bring in hordes of foreign workers to replace white Americans with. That's awesome. And then part of the reason why you and I started to have maybe a bit of a not so great of a start of a relationship here was because me and a few some other groypers were looking into your past, and it's like you've definitely evolved quite a bit. I think it's safe to say in your positions from 2 years ago or so, maybe like you said, even as recently as a year ago, and we're all very cautious right now because there is a big shift happening in the Republican Party, and I think that you look at the issues that are being talked about right now and things that normally wouldn't have been able to be said on a large major platform are, and a lot of people are starting to question a lot of stuff. So it's become, I would say, very advantageous in a certain way for a politician to come in and to echo the talking points, but without actually meaning it. Right? There's a large young Gen Z base that is very hungry and very eager to get involved in politics, and I see a lot of politicians are trying to capitalize on that, and that's kind of where I'm looking at you and I'm like, okay, he's taking pictures with Barry Weiss and he's praising Bill Ackman and your relationship with Vivek as well. It's like I'm not really seeing this sort of like evolution. So I hate to, I don't mean to just start off on that, but I feel like we kind of have to because that's sort of the large elephant in the room. Explain a little bit of that with your past and how maybe you came to evolve on certain issues.
This is pretty interesting. If you'd have told people 4 years ago, you got a gubernatorial candidate who's 30 years old, running in the third largest state, Trump's president. We're 8 minutes into the candidate interview, and you're running to be an America First candidate. What's your relationship with Barry Weiss? Right? It's a very interesting turn of events.
Yeah.
So let me just definitively come out and just say, and I don't want to bury the lead. I have never worked for Barry Weiss. I've never worked at the Free Press. The Free Press has their own journalists, operative word journalists, given the one-sided coverage of Israel. And then they have paid contributors, people like Coleman Hughes, for example. And then they have people who just submit op-eds. And there's been a whole range of people who have written for op-eds. And so just like the New York Times would publish an op-ed by Vivek Ramaswamy this past week about what it means to be an American, I had a number of op-eds published in the Free Press going all the way back to May of 2023. They published my first article about how high school debate had been hijacked by leftists. They were telling kids that if you brought up Trump's name in a high school debate round, you'd be disqualified. If you called undocumented people illegal immigrants, they would stop the round and cut you off. They wouldn't want you making the debate space unsafe. And so I kind of, I guess, thought of it as the Free Press had come onto the scene as, and I honestly didn't read a ton of the Free Press, but had been known as this heterodox place where conservatives would get published for pushing, views about free speech or whatever. And so I wrote that article, wrote a second follow-up for high school debate, wrote about fentanyl killing young Americans at the hands of the cartels, wrote about presidential debates being a little bit better by removing a moderator, going back to the Lincoln Douglas style that was used in the 1860s. So stuff like that. And I think I probably met Barry maybe 2 or 3 times, mainly just informally at social gatherings. The most recent image that I think you posted was at a Trump inauguration party. We just ran into each other. I'll tell you, she's actually quite charming. I mean, as much as you want to say about her views, I don't think she's ever truly been a journalist. She's always been an opinion type writer and editor. But there's no question that she has actual genuine charisma. And while I disagree with her on almost everything, including and especially my views on Israel that have now evolved, I think that that's just something where you go into it and say, man, if there's an opportunity to publish something and get the message out there, you do. I mean, I would get published in the New York Times. I would get published in the Wall Street Journal, right? It doesn't mean that I agree with the Wall Street Journal's views from their editorial board about, neoconservatism or the line go up globalism and corporatism that has engulfed the Republican Party.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. It was interesting because I had been asking you about the relationship with Barry, and that was a big kind of red flag for me because again, I mean, she stands for almost everything that we, you know, myself and other Groypers especially, we don't. She's not one of us. I mean, I think it's safe to say. And so seeing you post a picture from this year, and the explanation makes sense to me, but it was just again like kind of a one piece of like a larger puzzle as well because then there's your sort of praising of Bill Ackman, which Bill Ackman, if most people don't know, is as a notorious Democratic donor. He's a very large fan of Israel, and that's another kind of thing that I was like. I don't really see where this evolution is happening in terms of
Yeah.
your views on Israel, right? So, I mean, I'm not here to like try to sit here and call you a liar the whole time or anything like that. You know, I actually totally believe you on your opinion of Barry Weiss. People like that tend to be like very charming. That's kind of how they end up being where they're at, right? It's
Correct.
like so, and you know, at the end of the day, people are people. Politics and people are two totally separate things. I get that, but it's like I look and it's like, okay, this guy's friendly with Barry Weiss. He's friendly with Bill Ackman. He's friendly with Vivek. Where's the America First happening? That's kind of where I think a lot of us want to see where this evolution came from.
Yeah. So I think for me, the evolution would not have been possible. Um, Honestly, had Kamala Harris won, I don't think I would have evolved politically over the last year. I think the first couple of months of the Trump admin were really, really strong. I think probably the turning point, now if I look back at it, was that Zelensky. I think that Zelensky, White House Oval standoff with JD. I think was actually really, really good, really effective. For whatever reason, that seemed to be the peak of the Trump admin, and then everything since has just honestly been a huge disappointment. And it's not, I think there's the absolute disappointment, the relative disappointment, right? I think it's relative disappointment relative to what things could have been. So we're getting only about 1,000 deportations a day. Meanwhile, we're approving well over 1,100 H-1Bs every single day. So net, we're getting replaced by 100 people, and that's just H-1Bs. That's to say nothing about refugees, nothing about TPS. I think too that I had kind of bought the line for the longest time that illegal immigration is bad, but if it's legal, it is good. That we want people to come here legally. We want, as Trump said very early on, we want a big, beautiful wall, but we also want this big, beautiful door to allow people to come in. And I thought more about that. I think that was really driven by the H-1B issue is wait, who decides that it's legal, right? Corporatist, globalist, uniparty Republicans and Democrats in DC. Koch brother Republicans who want cheap foreign labor, and then Democrats who largely want cheap, reliable votes. Who decides what's legal? I mean, Beardson, the Somali, so-called Somali refugees that have taken over Minnesota, they're all legal immigrants. They were given either TPS or refugee status, right? Say what you want about what happened with Springfield, with the Haitians and the cats and the dogs. The only thing the media got right about that story was that they were not illegal immigrants. They were all here legally because of temporary protected status that was given to Haitians after the 2010 earthquake. And dare I even say, the 9/11 hijackers, as just an extreme example, they were also here legally. And so I actually really this year, prompted by the H-1B issue, started to wake up to this idea that no, mass migration, the great replacement is wrong in any form, whether it's legal or illegal, perhaps especially if it's legal, because then we're gaslit to believe that this is actually good, that 45% of Afghanis in America are on food stamp, 25% of Haitians in America on food stamp. The vast majority of both of those groups are here legally. They have legal protected status, which means they can get a mortgage, they can have access to welfare, Medicaid, food stamps, all of that stuff. And I think that's really what cut at this issue of mass migration is thinking about it from the H-1B point of view and then saying, wow, if H-1Bs come in and can take jobs from entry level positions, right? I mean, I think that there should be a place if you're the top scientist in, bad example, Iran, you're the top mathematician in Iran or in China or Qatar or whatever, and you want to come to America and teach at our university, yeah, absolutely. There should probably only be 1,000 of those coming into the country in a given year. Meanwhile, we We have 1,000 H-1Bs coming in every single day, and they're doing entry-level work. I mean, they're doing entry-level work that would go to our college grads. And this is not about, oh, well, why do you care? Someone else can get the job. No, you can't. You've got 70% of recent college grads who are not working full-time in the field of study. You can't get a job. You don't have an income. You don't have an income. You can't get a home. You don't have a home. You can't get married. You can't get married. You can't have kids. What's the point? And so I view like the H-1B issue in particular, I view that as an existential issue for young Americans if we don't tackle the mass migration, which is largely legal at this point because the southern border has been shut. I mean, Trump has to get credit for that, right? There hasn't been a single border crossing in 6 months. This is literally zero illegal aliens have come into the country. Yet that's little consolation when we have H-1B workers who walk in and take a job that could pay 50, 60, 70 grand that could go to a college grad at one of our universities.
Yeah. Well, and I will give credit where credit's due. It's kind of refreshing to hear somebody who's not afraid to like at least slightly criticize Trump that's running for governor, because that's I think been a big point of contention for a lot of us in the right wing, is that it's not that I hate Trump. I always love Trump. Trump's the best, like in terms of like a human being, as a persona, as a figure. Like I'll always love him and I'll always respect him. But this administration has been a disappointment for a lot of us. We voted for mass deportations and we are getting nothing. What was it? 10 million came underneath Biden. And it's like, we're nowhere near even getting close to that. And that's just under Biden, right? And everyone wants just to like tell us like, no, it's fine. No worry. They're coming. We've deported 500 this week. It's like, that's really not enough. And it seems totally unacceptable to a lot of us, especially with 2028 coming up. It seems like a very pivotal point in the right wing as at large, because we're going to have to, for the first time in 12 years, see what the Republican Party looks like kind of without Donald Trump, right? And there is going to be this sort of power vacuum. So it's kind of interesting to see how like there's these sort of cheerleaders where Trump can do absolutely nothing wrong at all, and then people who are a little bit more pragmatic and can realize like there is some improvements that could be made.
Yeah, and you bring up the mass deportation numbers. The majority of those are actually self-deportations, right? Those aren't actually ICE going and picking up people. Those are people saying, you know what, I saw the video from Alligator Alcatraz, or I'm no longer getting my Medicaid or food stamps. I'm just going to pack up and leave and take the free flight from Kristi Noem, who I think herself has been a massive disappointment. She wants to run around and cosplay as an ICE agent as opposed to doing what you actually need to do, which is workplace raids. I mean, that's, this workplace raid that happened in, what was it, in South Carolina for Hyundai? I mean, what did Lutnick come out and do? He essentially apologized to the South Korean government. What are we apologizing for, right? It's a workplace raid. I want taxing of remittances. Literally, if you start taxing remittances at 100%, you end the problem in 90 days. These entire economies in South America, Central America, East Africa, South Asia, you've got 10, 20% of GDP that's propped up by US outbound remittances. When you take away the incentive of coming here and earning a wage that, adjusted for purchasing power parity, is 5 to 10 times larger than that of your third world country, then guess what? There's literally no incentive because you've ruined the remittance arbitrage, right? You get to come here, make money in dollars, make 10x of what you would make back in Kenya, Senegal, Somalia, wherever, send it back. And now, by taxing remittances, you really deter that. And people say, like, you know what, it's not worth it anymore because I might as well just go back and take care of my family back there. You have to create an active deterrence. And if you're not taxing remittances, you're not doing workplace raids, you're not actually holding employers accountable. Brooke Rollins is the absolute last person who should be running USDA, because she is totally in bed with the pro-migrant ag lobby that just wants migrants here to pick strawberries, very similar to what Gavin Newsom would want in California, right? Oh my gosh, who's going to pick our strawberries? Very similar argument was actually made in the South, was who's going to pick this cotton, right? Like at some point, we have to wake up and say, look, there is a choice to be made here. What do you value more? Do you value the prosperity, safety, I hate to use this woke term, but dignity of Americans, the demographic stock of this country? Do you value that more than cheap strawberries, air fryers, and Amazon Basics t-shirts, right? What do you value more? Because if what you value is cheap, disposable crap, then yeah, the entire third world should move here because that's going to enable cheap, disposable crap. But if you actually value young white men being able to graduate high school and enter the labor force and not have to compete with third world Indians, Chinese, Pakistanis for an entry level job. Entry level job. I mean, the Indians are not any better at accounting or IT support in America than we are. We speak English better. We communicate better. We have better workplace synergies. The only difference, Beardson, is that they're willing to work at half the rate and work double the hours for half the rate, which essentially is they're willing to work 4 times harder than we are. You know, the pesky white men, they want to go to church on Sunday. The pesky white men want to be able to have vacation time. The pesky white men want to have an honest day's wage for an honest day's work. And so what we've become, I think that, you know, superficially, the Republican split right now is between MAGA and America First. Those terms are going to get hijacked um, all the time, because when you say America first, what do you mean by America first? Do you mean American GDP first? Do you mean American businesses first? For whom are we bequeathing the America first mandate? Right? That is the question. Because when President Trump sits with Laura Ingraham and says, "Oh, I know what MAGA means. I know what America First means. It is America First to bring in 600,000 Chinese people, because otherwise Bethune Cookman and Howard University and they're going to go bankrupt." Wait, how many Chinese kids are studying at Howard? Right? How many Chinese kids are studying at historically black universities? It's just incoherent MAGA slop. I think the real divide in the Republican Party right now, to get very specific and falsifiable, is economic nationalism versus economic corporatism, right? That is the divide. If you want NVIDIA to have record profits, then guess what? You are in the corporatist wing. If you want our universities to have the best Chinese talent, you are in the corporatist wing. If you believe, like I think most Americans do, Republican and Democrat, that jobs should be for Americans, that university admission slots should be for Americans, that homes should be for Americans, not foreign nationals, not Blackstone, not Airbnb speculators, that is literally nationalism. If you believe that America is a nation, that we are not a free trade area like Dubai, where you can just come and just plant a flag and become one of us, that is the real divide that's happening in the party. And so when people try to get me in a gotcha and say, "You're a nationalist," I just say, yeah, and so what? I am a nationalist. I believe that we are a nation. I believe we must preserve the demographic stock of this country. I believe that being an American is more than what Vivek Ramaswamy will say, which is just kind of checking the civics box of, do you believe in colorblind meritocracy or constitutional republic? No. I think that at the end of the day, we have to be a nation that looks out for our own people. And to do that means you actually have to turn away H-1Bs, immigrants. You have to say no. If you're willing to outbid a family of four, even by $2,000, $5,000, we're going to block that transaction from happening, because you're a Chinese national. You have not pledged allegiance to this country. In fact, you've shown contempt for this country. We are not going to let you outbid this family in Lakeland, Florida, or in Jacksonville, Florida, this family that wants to move into this 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom, this home that is going to be a precondition for them being able to go from having 1 kid to 3 kids, for them being able to have the mom who's currently working a part-time job to be able to stay at home and take care of the kids, for the dad to be able to go from making $15 an hour to 25 because he's going to move to a better part of town and able to have labor mobility and have a higher paying job. Those are the things that matter. And so I'm actually willing to block profit maximizing behavior in the interest of protecting American citizens in the name of economic nationalism. I believe that capitalism is the best economic system, but it is simply a means to an end. Free markets, we're not going to sit around and say, gosh, well, you lost your job to an H-1B, your home got bought by Blackstone, the year is 2030, you own nothing, an Indian replaced you, stupid white Christian man, but guess what? We still have a free market. We still have the freest, most capitalistic system in the world, so you should be proud of that. No, what we should aspire to is a free people, not a free market. And when you say free people, what people are we talking about? We're not talking about a generation of Vivek Ramaswamy's coming here and being, pharma bros and pumping and dumping stocks and coming here and taking jobs. When we say a free people, we mean specifically American citizens that respect our values, respect the fact that we are a Christian, no hyphen, a Christian nation, and respect our country well enough that they recognize that protecting the demographic stock of this country is absolutely existential. And if someone balks at that, you have to say, well, look, if you were to kill every single American and bring every single Indian and plant them in where you are in Kentucky or where I am in Florida, would this cease to be America? Of course it would. And so I view that as an extreme stylized example of this idea that no, America cannot be this land where so long as you believe in, I mean, India is a democracy, right? And there's like a poop throwing contest every 3 weeks there. They're a democracy, right? I know that there's this big debate with Matt Walsh. I actually think he's quite funny. I think that uh, when he said, it's become slop now, but what is a woman, right? And the left's response was, a woman is anyone who identifies as a woman. I mean, that's a classic textbook logical fallacy. It's retarded, right? But if you then say, like Vivek says, what is an American? And his literal answer is the Matt Walsh left wing fallacy, which is an American is anyone who identifies as an American, right? So the same logical fallacy we use to call out radical transgenderism is now being weaponized against, let's be honest, white Christian men who are like, wait, hold on, like you're not an American. You're coming here, you're mocking us, you're calling us lazy, you're calling us stupid. You're saying that our religion is not actually inseparable with our national identity. And now you're telling us what it means to be an American. Like, that's not okay. And literally in no other country could Beardson Beardley or James Fishback go to China, go to India, go to Pakistan, and be there for a single generation, be born of an anchor baby birthright citizenship, right? And then go lecture Indians about what it means to be Indian, or Chinese, what it means to be Chinese. And so I find it rich that we've done a complete 360 on criticizing logical fallacies, first from the left, but now from the right. People like Ben Shapiro, Ted Cruz, Vivek Ramaswamy, Byron Donalds, my opponent, saying an American is whatever you want it to be. An American is anyone who identifies as American. Well, Ilhan Omar identifies as an American. She literally identifies as an American, but she pledges her allegiance to a country that is literally the equivalent of, essentially, I mean, a reservoir of sewage, right? I mean, that is what Somalia is. And if we're going to be honest about that, we can't be honest and say that Ilhan Omar, who rejects the fact that we're a Christian country, will sit here and have contempt for white men being unemployed. We'll sit here and mock the opioid crisis that has taken over Appalachia, taken over a large part of my state as well, and say that that person is just as American as someone whose family goes back to literally fighting in the Civil War. Either side, it doesn't matter.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's well put. Oh, sorry. Smoked that cigarette before we went out live, and now I got a frog in my throat here, dude. This is me 5 minutes without a cigarette. I'm just like, but no, it's all great points, and I am happy to see you evolve on a lot of this stuff. I mean, I really am. I noticed a lot when I was kind of coming after you for some of the past positions that you held. It's like a lot of people were like, "Hey, back off him. I'm new to all this too." Which, I mean, kind of my point is like, okay, there's a difference in you being, waking up to all of this relevant fact and just being a guy on Twitter versus a guy that's running for governor. I mean, there's a little bit of a difference in that. But I've always been pro people waking up because, I mean, I was an atheist liberal for the most of my 20s, right? I mean, I may have came around to a lot of this stuff sooner than most people, but that's mainly just because I'm autistic. That's really what that is. A lot of time on 4chan, will make you believe just about anything. So, but but one of the things that I also wanted to ask you about, and I guess it's sort of this big elephant in the room here, is again going back. I don't mean to like keep dwelling on the Barry Weiss thing, but this is to allude to a different political topic, which is Israel. Because again, like 2 years ago, you're promoting Barry Weiss and her book. It's like How to Fight Anti-Semitism, and you attended an event with Bill Ackman about October 7th. And now it seems like your stance has changed, and the explanation that you gave for this sort of evolution on this position was that you were offered a trip to Israel. And I was hoping maybe we could maybe just flesh that out just a little bit, because because it's such a it is like the one thing that nobody wants to talk about and everybody wants to talk about at the exact same time. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it is interesting. It's like, regardless of how you feel about it, I do think it's something that shouldn't be so taboo to just have a discussion about, at the very least. And whether you have criticisms, whether you love Israel, this should be something that we should be able to have a conversation about out in the open. So I'm just curious to see how you evolved and how you feel now.
So I think that October 7th was just an awful, disgusting attack. I mean, yes, against Israel, but there were American citizens there. There were Filipino citizens, Thai citizens who were expat workers that were working there. I think it was an awful attack. And I think that when you look at what the immediate reaction was, and I think this was the mistake that I made looking back at it, is the immediate reaction was a black lesbian at Harvard or even here in Florida at UF or USF to run around and yell in the face of white kids, Hispanic kids, freaking fellow black kids and be like, "You're responsible. You enabled this." Shouting in classrooms, setting up encampments, etc. I mean, clearly well beyond speech. And I guess I I was led to believe, and I fell for it, so I'll take full credit, that that was all anti-Semitism. That what I was seeing, because it was related to Israel and October 7th, that when you had the same people that were pushing the George Floyd stuff, the Summer of Love, 2020, that they all of a sudden switched. And this is part of the Angela Davis school of thought that the Palestinian struggle mirrors that of the black struggle. I'd always been critical of that because this global solidarity movement between black activist and Muslim act, all of that, it just seemed very superficial, very astroturfed. So I looked at what immediately happened after October 7th, which I thought was a horrific war crime, essentially. And I looked at that and said, this spread of anti-Semitism is, in the name of attacking Israel, they're actually attacking Americans. They're disrupting college campuses. They're shutting down our interstates. They're blocking traffic. They're shouting at people. Remember in the summer of 2020, they were going up to people in DC and saying, right now, say that Black Lives Matter, getting into people's faces who were just having dinner on an outside area. And I viewed, I guess, that as what happened after October 7th as all lumped together with, well, this is all anti-Semitism, even though most of the culprits or most of the victims of this harassment weren't actually Jews, right? I mean, most of the people on a college campus, just statistically speaking, are not Jewish, yet their life was being disrupted, their classes, they were being harassed, people were running into classes with megaphones shouting free Palestine, whatever. And that is separate and apart from, we'll talk about Gaza in a second. So I guess I viewed that and said, wow, this is all part of some anti-Semitic craziness that was overtaking our universities, and didn't actually think about it from the perspective of what actually anti-Semitism means. Randy Fine, who you'll be no stranger to, having known, who he is.
Hard to miss him.
Yeah, in more ways than one. And it's funny because he called me a couple of weeks ago before I was running and chewed me out for 42 minutes about this and called me an anti-Semite. And I think that word too, the more, I don't think you really grasp how weak and shallow of a ad hominem attack anti-Semite is until you've actually been accused of it. And I actually literally had not been accused of it until about 4 or 5 months ago when I started really after the IDF bombing of the Holy Family Catholic Church. I'm Catholic, right? And so, yep. I mean, guilty as charged, I really only started caring about what was happening in Gaza till our own, as a Christian, were actually being killed. And I mean, rather selfishly, but that's when I actually kind of woke up to the Gaza side of the things. I'll talk about the Israel trip later and how that came about. But for me, I think there was this young Muslim boy who is not like an American citizen by naturalization, was actually born in America, lived here in Florida, from Tampa, also lived in Melbourne, which is on the East Coast, Space Coast by Cape Canaveral. He was in the West Bank, and allegedly he threw a rock at a IDF vehicle, injuring no one. The IDF only alleged that he threw the rock, and he sat in an Israeli military prison for 9 months. And I was made aware of this about the 7th month. I had never heard of this. And I went and met with the family. It's a Muslim family. They live here in Florida. This kid's an American citizen. I'm like, wait, hold on a second. Why is the Israeli government receiving $3 billion a year in aid from taxpayers? Not from the government, literally taxpayers, right? There's no government aid. It's taxpayer-funded aid. And they are jailing an American citizen who has not been charged with any crime formally, let alone convicted. And he lost 27 pounds and contracted scabies. And this kid's 15 years old when he gets picked up by the IDF while he is in the West Bank visiting. And the number of people, forget online for a second, because the online stuff, whatever. But the number of people in my own life who messaged me or called me to disown me and say, Jewish people that I know, I respect, and said, what you are doing is anti-Semitic. And then what they would say is they would say, how many times did you post about the hostages? How many times did you speak about this Muslim kid who was named Abraham? And that was the test. If this was anti-Semitic, that I was only focusing on the plight of an American citizen from my own state, just a couple hours where I grew up. And I literally met the family. I met with them, made a video. I texted the video to President Trump because I wanted to put this on his radar. And I said, we got to do something about this, because I don't care what you, first off, what you were alleged of doing is one thing. But if you're an American citizen, that is the highest standard possible. I said, well, why are you holding Israel to a double standard? Isn't that anti-Semitic? They told me. I said, well, first off, I'm going to hold Israel to the same standard that it holds. They claim to be the only democracy in the Middle East. That's what they claim to be. And yet they're jailing a 15-year-old for throwing a rock and injuring no one. And so even if he threw the rock, is that worth keeping a kid in prison for 9 months to where he's losing 27 pounds, is in solitary confinement most of it, and he contracts scabies? He was just released, by the way, a couple weeks ago. And of course, released unequivocally. No charges filed, nothing, no apology. They just released him because there was no legitimate reason to hold him in the first place. That's where, again, I don't think, from where I sit, I don't think I could truly have understood what it means to be labeled an anti-Semite until I was actually labeled an anti-Semite. And literally people that I've known for 5 or 6 years calling me up and saying, I never want to speak to you again because you are siding with Hamas instead of the only democracy in the Middle East.
Yeah. No, I mean, that actually does track with me, to be honest with you. And it was kind of one of those things where, again, I guess part of the reason why I was so like antagonizing you, I guess, a bit, is because I also understand too that like these things can't really be explained very easily on text on Twitter. Twitter is a very short form platform, and so I appreciate you coming on and sort of clarifying that. Yeah. So how did the trip that was like seemed to be kind of the breaking point for you, was the getting the call, so to speak?
So I actually, the way I think about it actually is, and again, I think it's probably not the best way to think about this is over text. The trip probably wasn't the breaking point. The absolute breaking point was 3 or so months ago when I met with Ibrahim's family here in Florida. That was the absolute last straw. The way I got treated by my Jewish friends, Israeli sympathizing friends, literally calling me anti-Semitic for speaking up for an American citizen who's being held without due process in the so-called only democracy in the Middle East. Where I really started the Israel trip was because it was like a young business professionals trip. And so my life prior to seeking to be the governor of my state was I worked as a trader at a hedge fund. So I was what's called a macro trader. I traded currencies, interest rate derivatives. My job was to look at what Jerome Powell was going to do next month and try to make money off of it, right? So if Jerome Powell was going to raise interest rates, that would mean that inflation might be lower, so you could trade an inflation swap. Or if the Japanese central bank was going to cut interest rates, that means you could short the Japanese yen because lower interest rates, all else equal, would depreciate the Japanese currency versus the dollar. So that's my career, my entire life. So I dropped out of college. I started a macro hedge fund after college, so 2 years after. Right, so I did 2 years, then I dropped out, started a hedge fund, and then I worked at another hedge fund that was based in New York, even though I was remote. And so in that world, I mean, you go to galas, you go to different events. When I was traveling up to New York, probably went there, 3 or 4 times a year. I rubbed, shoulders with a lot of people who had tried to get me to go to an Israel trip, and I actually never been. I don't really plan on going, honestly. But for me, that was kind of the opening, because in the preparation for that trip, it became very clear what this trip was. This was not a come to Israel, have fun. We're going to go to a club. We're going to do some hookah. We're going to have some falafel. You're going to meet some beautiful blonde girl in Tel Aviv. That was how the trip was sold to me originally. It was like no strings attached, whatever. And it became very clear what this trip actually was, which is a propaganda mission, right? I was going to go there. I was going to see certain sides of the country. And I was expected upon my arrival to put out a number of social media posts that were not driven by my own experiences in Israel. And that's what I just had a gut reaction and said, I'm not doing this. And I can't say that, that was an epiphany moment for me, and then I all of a sudden started reading more about what was happening. No, I just kind of checked out, and then Holy Family happened. And then third strike for me was being labeled an anti-Semite for speaking out against an American citizen who was a teenager being detained by the IDF.
Yeah, no, it actually does make total sense to me, to be perfectly honest with you. I'm a little salty that they offered you a big, blonde, beautiful woman. If Israel did that to me, I would be like the IDF strongest soldier, honestly. Like, I'm waiting. Everybody keeps talking about these $7,000 checks and they're getting offered women, and it's like, dude, I'm an easy sell, okay? But they haven't offered that to me yet.
Well,
But
they gave one to Cash Patel, not blonde, but they're working on it.
oh, be careful. You don't want to go down that road. Elijah
I know
Schaefer's
Elijah
getting.
Schaefer's got 5 million,
I
reasons not to
know.
do that anymore.
I know exactly. It's crazy, man. You gotta. So you put the hat on the other day. I gotta ask you about that.
Yeah,
What led to that? I mean, I know that there was some groypers at your event in Florida,
yeah.
and you've been doing a lot of these events. Which, again, no pun intended. Hats off to you for doing that. What led to you putting on the hat? What was that moment?
So it was during a Q&A. So I joined the race 4 weeks ago, and what I've said is that I'm going to visit all 67 counties in Florida, and so I've already started that. 7 counties down, another 60 to go. Got 9 months. Elections August 18th. I got to win the primary, beat Byron Donalds, and then go on to win the general, which is sufficiently easier just because we're a red state. So if you win really the majority of the election is the primary itself. So the first I got into a little bit of trouble over this the first time. So about 2 weeks ago, I was at an event in a rural county called Pasco County, which is just outside of Tampa. And this was a really sleepy Republican club. The average age in the room must have been in the mid 70s. And then I get there and there's these young guys. I mean, they're 16, 17 years old. And they're wearing the Blue America First hat, which I had heard about. I had seen, I'd seen Nick's clips on Twitter and stuff like that. But I get there and they asked me a really thoughtful question in the Q&A, and then afterwards stick around, talk with them, and I'm like, wait, you guys are, and they self-identified as groypers. I'm like, you guys are groypers, you say, right? And I'm like, holy crap, like these kids, just their handling, just objectively, forget about political alignment, their handling of history, of current events, just they knew what they were talking about. Where like these kids would get a 5 on the AP US government exam, and the average kid might get a 2, maybe a 3, right? In high school. And it's like these kids are really smart. And I walked away from that conversation not having actually spent a lot of time talking to people like this in person. I was on with Elijah Schaefer on Rift, and I was like, yeah, like say what you want about Nick and all the stuff that's happening. Like Nick's followers, as I have met them, are insanely smart, insightful, and patriotic. And then the calls from donors, like, you need to disavow Nick, you need to disavow his followers. I'm like, absolutely not. And I don't know if you saw this video, but I made it. It was literally in a Walmart parking lot. I was like, I want to clarify some comments that I made about the supporters of Nick Fuentes. And I want to clarify and apologize for absolutely nothing, right? Because this idea that I'm going to disavow anyone, any American, least of all people that I largely agree with on some of these issues, just because a donor called me up and said, you know what this guy stands for? I'm like, I actually haven't met him, but I have met his supporters who I self-identify as supporters. And I thought they were incredibly smart. And I'm not going to sit here and throw people down the river because you have some ideation of how these people look or what they represent. I mean, this is going back to the deplorables comment from Hillary Clinton. I mean, heck, to criticize the Republicans, this goes back to Mitt Romney's 47% comment that nearly half the country is just stealing from billionaires and millionaires, right? I mean, this contempt for working class people has been around for a long time. And I think that goes back to the division of economic nationalism versus economic corporatism. And so to go to your question right now, I was at a pizza parlor. I was expecting 10, 15 people to show up. We had posted the event about 24 hours beforehand. So West Palm Beach, and about 80 people showed up. And it was a lot of the same guys, the America First hat. And the question came up, which is we're seeing all over social media now, going to congressional staffers, going to members of Congress themselves. And very simply, it is America first or Israel first. And I thought, like, hold on, why is that a gotcha? Right. So just go back to first principles, Beardson. America first, or insert literally every other country here first. And it would be hands down, like America first, Qatar first, like America first, America first, China first, America first, America first, Canada first, America first, Brazil first. But and no staffer would push back on that, Democrat or Republican, if it was any other country. And then it's America first, Israel first. And you have these congressional staffers, senior people, and interns too, hiding their faces in shame, refusing to answer that. And so from first principles, so we can have a debate about Israel and all that stuff, right? But even if you thought and I don't, even if you thought that Israel is the greatest ally and the greatest democracy, and we would be wiped off the face of the earth by the Houthis and the Iranians and Hezbollah and Hamas if Israel were not the bulwark, right, against those threats. If you actually believe that, it's still America first, right?
Yeah.
And so I watched these videos. I'm like, wait, how is this even up for debate? And so I was asked this question by one of the people who showed up, and I said, let me just answer it. I saw the guy with the America First hat on the side of the pizza parlor, and I said, let me just answer this question with a prop. So I went over to him, I asked him, and I said, we are told that this hat represents hatred. No, this hat represents America First, literally represents love of Americans, love of ourselves as more than just a economic zone, but as a nation. That the people that I have met, they don't hate anyone. They have an unapologetic, unwavering love for our people, our country. And this idea to weaponize and villainize them is disgusting. It was disgusting when Hillary Clinton did it. It was disgusting when Joe Biden called this garbage. It was also disgusting when Mitt Romney said that 47% of the country is just a bunch of leeches. It's all disgusting, and I'm not going to play that game. And so I said, I'm putting this hat on because on the question of Israel first or America first, it is America first every single time. And it doesn't matter what that country is, especially Israel, but America first versus literally any other country, it has to be first. It has to be America first. It's just like, I don't even know how you are an elected representative of the, if you went to Brazil and you stood outside of the Brazilian Senate and said America first or Brazil first, and anyone said anything other than very quickly, without hesitation, Brazil first, that person should be tarred and feathered and would be by Brazilian citizens. Same thing in any other country. And this idea that Israel has this super status amongst our politicians, I don't think I fully understood it until I was actually kind of getting called out for it in my own way for speaking out against this kid. And because I hadn't been like an online profile. I mean, I'd got on Fox News, I talked about the economy, but I hadn't really waded into foreign policy, right? I mean, my shtick as a hedge fund investor, now running my own investment firm called Azuria, my shtick was comment on the Fed, comment on wages, comment on the economy, comment on interest rates. I had never been on to talk about Israel or Qatar or foreign policy. I was always on to talk about the economy.
Yeah. So that's how do you feel about being labeled now as like the Groyper candidate? Because there's been a lot of pieces. I think like Will Stansel put something out. It says this is the new Groyper candidate. Yeah, and that was honestly again part of the reason why I was like, okay, wait a second, I don't remember signing off on this guy. That's kind of like the interesting thing about it. And it seems like now the narrative is to sort of try to frame you this without there being, I mean, we hadn't even really interacted at all or anything. So like, what's your opinion on that title of being this quote unquote Groyper candidate that seems like liberals and your enemies want to label you as?
Yeah, I mean that's clearly what they're trying to do. Is they're trying to do the oldest trick in the book, which is guilt by association. That society, including large parts of the Republican Party, and we saw this at AmFest, society has labeled the Groypers as this group of disgraceful deplorables, as this group of xenoph or whatever. So that's already an established fact according to them. And so if we can label the candidate the Groyper candidate, much like the Nazi candidate, that's how the media would spin it, that is a way to permanently tarnish him. It was, I got to say, it was rather brave of Will Stansel to write that piece, especially given what's happened to him recently. I mean, it was only this summer that he was sexually assaulted by Grok. And so it was weird to see, I think rather brave to see him come out and write something so lengthy and thoughtful about the campaign. I don't know that I identify honestly with anything other than truly objective falsifiable things, which is I'm America first because I'm Americans first, American citizens first, and I'm an unapologetic economic nationalist. I believe that the government should block certain transactions, even if it minimizes profits, if it's not in the best interest of the core demographic majority of the United States, if it's not in the best interest of American citizens, if it's not in the best interest of home ownership. I think that if we become a nation of renters, if we become a nation of 50-year mortgage enablers, that if we say that the solution is no, it's not kicking out BlackRock and Blackstone from buying single family homes. No, it's not preventing foreign Chinese nationals from buying up single family homes. The solution is actually just you paying through the roof on the same home, but over 50 years as opposed to 30. I mean, that's literally usury. That's debt slavery. And I want to be careful with that word because my opponent, Byron Donalds, has taken issue of me calling him a slave. But I was on an interview with the Freedman earlier, the American descendants of slaves, and they rightly pointed out that he is not a descendant of slave, and he should not be ever criticizing anyone calling him a slave because he's from Panama, and he has no claim on pulling the slave card whatsoever. So I just think that this idea of the ad hominem attack, that this collective punishment of, I think the Democrats have used it calling Republicans fascists. The new iteration that didn't work is now labeling large parts of the Republican Party followers of Nick Fuentes or Groypers. I'll just give you one really specific example here locally in Florida, which was there was a school board member by the name of Robert Alvaro. He is a American citizen. He fled Cuba 30 years ago, and he's now an elected school board member in Northeast Florida in a county called Clay. And he made a personal video on his Facebook page saying that Black students in our high schools disproportionately cause disciplinary issues, which is totally validated by the actual statistics. And he said that Nick Fuentes has a point about this. Like, that's literally what he said in a Facebook video as a duly elected school board member. And now the knives are out, not from the Democrats. The Democrats are totally irrelevant here in Florida. The knives are out from the Republican Party establishment, including the chairman of the Republican Party, Evan Power, including the wife of the lieutenant governor, who's apparently going to run for governor at some point, who sits on the state board of education, the state commissioner of education, who has now summoned this guy without any statutory authority to appear before the state board of education to, quote, explain his remarks. I mean, this is the kind of system we're living in, is that you commit the capital crime of saying you agree with someone like Nick Fuentes in public, and literally the Republican Party loses its mind and wants to summon you before a speech tribunal and have you atone for your sins in public. And I view the threat now. I view the debate now, the division now. They say there's division in the Republican Party. There should be division in the Republican Party, because if the Republican Party is going to go down this route of attacking free speech, of using criticism of Israel as a pretext to defund our city and state governments, if we are going to go down this path of rejecting economic nationalism and looking out for our own in the interest of corporate profits and the line go up economic trajectories, then the Republican Party deserves to be totally destroyed. I mean, it just doesn't serve a purpose anymore.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. It's interesting too, I guess, with the I guess the labeling of being a Groyper candidate, because it's like, again, not to bring up old wounds here, but it's like, I'm a Groyper, and I've been the one that's given you the most crap, I think, for them. I mean, maybe not the most, but I've been giving you a lot of crap on Twitter for the past week. It's like, okay, thank you. I'll take it. Thank you. But it's like, I guess it's just so frustrating because part of the reason why, people say that Groypers are unruly, and I'll be the first to admit they are. They are a very rambunctious bunch, to say the least, especially on the internet. But a lot of that's just frustration. It's like we are always being talked about, we are always being addressed, we are always this sort of elephant in the room, so to speak, but we've never really had an opportunity to actually sit at the table and have a talk with anybody, right? The strategy for so long when it comes to these issues has been sort of like gatekeeping us out and not allowing us to like share our voice. I mean, I'm not young, I'm 37, I'm an old man, so, but most of these guys are young men who just care about the future of their country. At the end of the day, they're Christians, they're Catholics, they want America to be preserved and to thrive as it used to. And of course, everybody gets labeled as hateful and everything else. It's like, no, people are just angry. And that's sort of the problem. And that's honestly why I really appreciate you reaching out to me to do this interview too. This is really like the first time I feel like somebody's actually sat down and actually talked with us, which is that it was a big integrity move. So I do appreciate that.
Well, I mean, honestly, as frustrated as I might have been by some of the posts, I think the America First movement has gotten royally burned over the last 12 months, especially, but even over the last couple of years. People like Vivek Ramaswamy coming in, promised us, the world, fell out of the clear blue sky, promised us the world, and then fell off the face of the earth and is now somewhere in India, right? And has already had 2 Christmas crash outs back to back to back. That's to say nothing about the Trump admin. I think the last couple of months has been a really, really disappointing thing. I mean, I respect the president, but I think you respect someone enough to tell them the truth that the last couple of months has been really disappointing, and to pretend otherwise would just be a lie. I'll just tell you, the people that have reached out to me, the so-called self-identified Groypers, they have said that when they meet politicians or they go to political events, they are told to take that hat off. They are told that if they are running into a politician, Republican or Democrat, but especially a Republican, who even identifies or say things that are America First adjacent, they won't take a hat. They won't take a picture with someone who wears that hat. And I'm never going to disavow my fellow Americans. I'm never going to say take that hat off or I'm not going to take a picture with you. I think that hat, I mean, literally as it is stated, America First is something that, heck, probably a third of Democrats, if we're going to be completely honest. I mean, not the MSNBC online bulwark, blue sky Democrats, but I think a third of Democrats be like, yeah, we should put America first, right? That this idea that, St. Paul writes about in First Timothy, this idea of looking out for your own as opposed to the outside world, that is something that isn't controversial. I mean, it's literally Christianity, that we should not be looking out for other people, feeding other people, clothing other people, taking care of other people, while our own people, including and especially Americans who have been here for a very, very long time, are seeing their own country being destroyed in front of their eyes. Politicians who will shy away from this idea of the great replacement, which is honestly, I mean, I think people have called it all sorts of things. If you just want to be completely literal about it, the great replacement is 100% real. And the Democrats don't deny it. They cheer it on. They literally cheer it on. And Republicans cheer it on. Because if you're supporting legal immigration, if you're supporting the H-1B program, you are fueling the great replacement of Americans. No question about it.
Yeah, totally. Man, I don't want to keep you too long. I know you've been kind of doing a circuit today, and I don't want to cut it short either. But I feel like after everything that we've been through, I do feel a lot more satisfied about your positions, about where you came from. Like it actually has eased a lot of my concerns, and I really appreciate it. I want to get a little off topic here because I want to get to know the man behind the campaign. You and I, before we started here, you were talking about the GameCube. You and I were talking about, you dropped some, I mean, honestly, respect. I can't even, bro was dropping some real baller game. He's like, okay, you got a Game Boy with an IPS display? I'm like, dude, okay, all right, this guy knows ball, all right? So I gotta ask, like, top 3, like, favorite video games. Like, what is James Fishback playing when he's not campaigning?
Gosh, so I was really a PC gamer growing up. Call of Duty 4 online was a lot of fun. Was a lot of fun. I remember GoldenEye on 64 was great. And then this is gonna sound maybe cringe, but Lego Star Wars, like the original Lego Star
No,
Wars
dude,
on
yeah,
the PC was so freaking fun.
yeah,
Was so much fun because of how creative it was, and it played into my kind of childhood franchise was always Star Wars, so that was a ton of fun. I liked, I think Portal was a really memorable game, just a ton of fun to play on the PC. But yeah, we were kind of geeking out a little bit about the mod retro, which is what Palmer's doing, and Game Boy Advance. So I have a Game Boy Advance, Game Boy Advance SP, both modded with IPS. Do a lot of Mario Kart on there and stuff. But yeah, I saw the GameCube when we first logged on.
yeah. See, if we would have let off with this, like, things could have just taken a
Right.
completely different turn, you know?
Right. I should have run on a platform of giving the Groypers all GameCubes. That'd have been
Yeah.
far more disarming, right?
Yeah, real. We need you. If you win, I desperately need you to just start Gamergate 2. We need a Gamergate 2 to happen. I'm not sure you're familiar with Gamergate, but it was like they ruined video. This is what politicized me. This is really what, like, I guess red pilled me, was the fact that I started playing video. I've been playing video games all my life, and you start to notice this trend of diversity and inclusion incorporating its way into every game that you play, and it gets to a certain point where it's like, dude, I am so tired of playing as like an ugly woman in every game that I play. Please, like, I don't even care about playing as a woman. Can she at least be kind of hot, you know?
What was the first game where that really was evident for you?
Mass Effect. It was like when the first 3 Mass Effects, they were incredible, they were great, and then they did Mass Effect Andromeda, and it was such like a big downgrade. It's like I'm looking at the women in this game and I'm just like, they look like they're gonna call HR on me, you know? Like, that's who I have to play as. It's like, oh, like literally a Karen, you know? And I'm just like, we're so cooked, and it just kept getting worse and worse and worse in every game, and so it was brutal. It was brutal, and I was like, they are literally taking the video games away from me now. Like this is my line in the sand. This is my, you know, this is my hill that I'm gonna die on. I can't allow this to happen.
Yeah, it's and you think about like Tomb Raider, right? This the beautiful woman in like Lara Croft Tomb Raider with double D's, and she had a crop top, and she had two pistols, and she's running around, and it's like, or the girls in like GoldenEye with James Bond and stuff like that.
Oh
Like
yeah,
this was like the perfect example. Maybe it's like the Need for Speed franchise, right? Like all the bombshells who were waving the flags before the race would begin, and then you've got black lesbian chick from AR. Like we need to speak to you about that tweet from last night, right?
yeah,
That's kind of the
yeah.
the transition over. But how do we address that? Maybe I don't know how many government. The view I've had with a lot of this stuff is using government contracts at the state level to as leverage against companies. But I don't know that we have a ton of state contracts with Electronic Arts or Activision or anything. But if those show up, we'll have to do Gamergate too, and use the power of the state government to bring back beautiful women into our video games.
Dude, you're right. That's it. You got my endorsement now. Like that's it. Like that's all I needed. Okay, that's incredible. Now finally. Well, and
Well, no,
like,
maybe there is something to be done because there's the esports category with high schools. If they're being hosted at public high schools, no video games can be played at public high schools in Florida if the following criteria is not met for aesthetic beauty in women.
dude, there you go. Dude, this guy, all right, like on his feet too, just like instantly. All right, I'm sold. I'm sold, man. That's awesome. Well, and like I'm like obviously we're joking around with the gaming thing, but like I do kind of see gaming as this sort of it is a very political thing. It used to not always be. It was sort of like thrust into the limelight in politics, and it has become sort of this test of the water, so to speak. It seems like this sort of diversification of gaming kind of led to all sorts of other things. Because I mean, gaming is the largest entertainment business in the world right now, right? It's like, I mean, it makes more money than literally anything. And actually, this kind of leads into it. Like one more thing I want to ask you real quick, and then I'll let you go. Is your position on AI and data centers? Because right now, one of the three manufacturers for RAM in the world is going to stop doing consumer business
Yeah.
solely to sell to these data centers, right? And there's been a big controversy with AI being used in gaming in terms of like generated assets and things like that. So where do you stand on all of that?
So I hadn't heard the RAM thing, but that's kind of crazy. I'm gonna look. What's the company called?
Micron,
Oh, that's
they
Micron.
made a crucial RAM, yeah, and they're stopping production in February 2026 solely for data centers.
That's insane.
Yeah,
Okay. So I need to look into that. So my I think that the concept of an AI data center makes a ton of sense, right? I mean, this is new technology. It needs to be one, train the model and then infer the model in real time for the end user. But as it's been practically deployed in places like Memphis by XAI or by other organizations in Georgia or Pennsylvania, is and I traded natural gas at a hedge fund. So when you think about electricity prices, if you bring on an AI data center that is the equivalent of 1 million homes of electricity demand, and you don't increase electricity supply, whether it's nuclear, coal, whatever, that by definition, everyone is going to pay more. And that is literally corporate welfare if we have to pay for Scam Altman and Elon Musk's AI data trainer, data center training. So I'm against them for that reason. Also, there's real danger to water supply because of the output of AI data sets. We've seen that already, again, not hypothetically, but empirically in places like Tennessee and in Georgia. And then in Florida in particular, we're really sensitive about, and rightly so, about the natural environment here. We've been really overdeveloped the last 10, 15 years by Democrats and Republicans. And so the idea that citrus land or cattle land would be sold off to build an AI data center, like I think ChatGPT 6 is going to be just going to work no matter what, whether an AI data center is built in the Everglades or not, or is built on citrus land or not. And the way I've been kind of building out the vision for the campaign is that, look, there's New Florida and Old Florida. New Florida is, as Byron Donalds, my opponent, says, the financial capital of the world. New Florida is, as Byron Donalds says, speeding up the construction of quantum computing, which is just a euphemism for AI data centers because he recognizes that term in itself is a pejorative now, versus the Old Florida, which is we like the way we are. We need to actually address the real issues that are affecting our state: housing affordability, mass deportations, get those up, build out public schools, universal school choice. And so I'm pro AI, but I don't think that Florida residents should be paying for the cost of training this artificial intelligence. And I think longer term, we need to get serious about nuclear energy. We closed one of our nuclear plants 5 years ago in Citrus County on the Crystal River. And what I would want to do as governor is build out a ton of nuclear supply, even smaller nuclear reactors, because as you see in France, I mean, electricity is essentially free there. And that's something you want to actually deliver inflation. You want to deliver rather affordability is you don't bring down inflation from 5% a year to 3%. Things are still getting more expensive by 3%, but you actually bring outright deflation, outright cost cuts across the board. So by definition, you increase purchasing power. That's what we can do. We can't do it as easily with ag, but we can definitely do it with electricity, and nuclear has proven to be the case there.
Dude, that's awesome. Yeah, I've always been pro nuclear. I'm glad to hear you say that. It's awesome. It's like nuclear always seems to be this sort of boogeyman that people think because they think Chernobyl, right? Like that's where everybody's mind
Chernobyl,
goes.
or yeah, or
Yeah, or
obviously what
Japan.
happened in Japan, right? But
Yeah,
again, the way you know that nuclear is good, and forget like the scientific stuff for a second, the way you know the nuclear is good is that the left hates it because it literally would solve the climate change. Like they could never ever want, because it is literally the perfect solution,
yeah,
right? And it would totally render their entire climate hoax movement meaningless overnight if we just went to nuclear, right?
yeah.
And so that's how you know, just in a very visceral sense, nuclear is the answer, because the left just absolutely hates it. They want nothing to do with it because it solves every single one of their points, right? Zero emissions, cheap, reliable energy, no real impact on the environment in terms of toxic, none of that. It solves every single one of their problems. Therefore, if their problems are solved, their entire grift is over. Therefore, they want to keep it going. And so what I've said is we're going to do a total moratorium on wind and solar, especially in Florida. We're going to do a moratorium on AI data centers. I think also, if you think about something like the concept of Moore's law, right? AI data centers are going to become progressively smaller over the next 5-10 years. And we're going to figure out the energy impact problem. And we're also going to bring a ton of energy online. And so if we just wait 5 or 10 years, that we'll be able to tackle this problem and then maybe build AI data. They'll have 1/10 of the electricity impact, maybe 1/100th of the geographic occupancy impact, and we'll be fine. I mean, my grandfather used to call Steve Wozniak on the phone. He taught computer science at FAU and herded cattle out in Okeechobee in South Florida. This guy, I mean, the computer that is in our pocket today is the equivalent of what would have been literally 1,000 acres of computer supply in the 1960s in terms of just outright inference or training impact. And yet, if we just wait 5 or 10 years, we'll be able to achieve that. And this idea of this alarmism over, well, China's going to win the AI arms race. So I guess my pushback to that is, what does that even mean? Just objectively, falsifiably, what does it mean when Vivek says that if our kids don't study through the entire summer and we have to that China's going to win? What does that mean? China's going to win. China, whatever China does, they're going to lose. They have no civil liberties. They're not a Christian country. They're completely vapid. They have no sense of identity. And what does that mean if China's going to win? And that's why I'm really sick of any politician, but Vivek in particular, saying the Chinese literacy rate is this and the American literacy rate is that, and we need to really get our act together. First off, those numbers are completely false because the Chinese numbers are only pulled from tier 1 cities, which are predominantly wealthy. And then our numbers are full of all of the illegal immigrants who can't even read English, let alone take an AP US history exam and get a passing score. So both sides of the equation are distorted. And then second, even if the average Chinese kid could do math better than the average American kid, who cares? Who cares? We need to be held to our own standard. We didn't go through the 19th and 20th century dominating every single field, putting a man on them, doing everything right, and then say, gosh, well, the Chinese really are the ones who we're going to beat. I think competition is good, but I think holding ourselves to this global standard, how are our kids going to compete in a global marketplace? My answer to that, Beardson, is I don't want my kids to ever have to compete in a global marketplace because I'm an unapologetic American nationalist. I believe that our economy serves one purpose, and that is to serve our people. And the second we start thinking about issues like how are our kids going to compete with the Indians, our kids should never have to compete with the Indians. Our companies compete with India. Our economy, our GDP can compete with India, but our people should not have to compete. Our 18, 19-year-old students should not be competing with Indian nationals for an entry level job at an IT role at Dell or Microsoft or Accenture or Deloitte. And that is, I mean, I think that's the foundational debate, is that everyone says, well, we all agree on the problem, we just disagree on the solution. That's the the GOP slop line, right? We just disagree, and good earnest debate will solve it. No, we disagree on the solution, we disagree on the problem, but we also, at the very basic level, we disagree on the premise. And the premise is that America is a nation, not an economic zone, not a free trade area. The premise is that I am willing, as an economic nationalist, to sacrifice GDP, sacrifice corporate profits, sacrifice stock market performance, if it means that the men in this country have a real shot at getting ahead.
Totally agree. Mr. Fishback, thank you so much for sitting down and agreeing to do this, especially after everything that we've done this week. Yeah, I'm glad we get to sit down and talk. You know how it is on X, and especially in politics. It's like, it's easy to get off into the weeds. And for the record, like you said, I'm not going to apologize for anything, but I am glad that we got to sit down and have this conversation and actually talk and get to know each other a little bit, because at the end of the day, that's kind of the whole thing. You kind of came out of nowhere. You had this, real groundswell. Credit to you, of course. But it's like, okay, who is this guy really? And I really appreciate you taking the time to come and talk to me, to introduce yourself to us. And now that I've gotten to know you a little bit more, I'm a fan. You can consider myself a fan. So I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Beardson. Really appreciate it, man. Merry Christmas to you and your family, and I'll see you in Kentucky soon, and we'll do some GameCube.
Yeah, sounds good. Happy holidays.
Thanks,
Okay, I'm just kidding. Merry Christmas. Bye.
Merry Christmas. Bye.